All right, welcome to day 8 of the vlog as my 30-day challenge to vlog every day for 30 days, share an idea. 24 hours into the 5-day water fast, as I mentioned yesterday. So far, I feel pretty good. I'm a little bit hungry, but nothing out of the ordinary. The topic today is going to be on optimism and pessimism. Um, because the modern world we're kind of constantly connected to the news and to technology. We kind of have like instant access to all of the world's events going on all the time. And as a result, we constantly are bombarded by media that makes the world kind of seem very, very scary and dangerous. And part of that's driven by the psychology that um, like things that are scary and dangerous and that like kind of hit the feelings of our survival attract our attention. And because the media is kind of they're kind of incentivized to capture our attention so they get more viewers. They tend to show stuff that's dangerous and scary and they capture their attention by making it seem really, really bad. But in reality, we're kind of just connected in this day and age where like the media gives a very biased view of the way the world actually is because we're constantly bombarded with like hearing all the dangerous stuff and not necessarily all the good stuff. And that's because of the psychology that the bad stuff is what attracts our attention. So basically, I think the media in large part is due to this, and it's caused the world to be quite pessimistic. But there's every reason to believe to be optimistic about the world and really looking forward to what the future brings. There's a great book called Enlightenment Now by Steven Pinker that goes into all sorts of details, but the short of it is that by like almost every metric that you can measure, whether it's wealth or happiness or lifespan or just like all the aspects that make life good, the world's better than it ever has been by pretty much every imaginable way that you can look at it in human history, really. It's a hard thing to measure. Like happiness is a tough thing to measure, but like there are ways to measure it, or better and worse ways to measure it and look at indicators to measure how well a society functions. And by almost every metric, the world's better than it is as ever has been. The other thing about being kind of optimistic is there's a lot of unknowns in the world, and being optimistic when there's something unknown or in a situation of us not really knowing, it makes sense to be optimistic because it leads to a more likely outcome of us solving a problem or at least attempting to solve it. There's a really good quote. Optimists tend to view anything adverse as temporary, specific, and eternal, while pessimists will view an adverse situation as permanent, pervasive, and personal. These two styles produce very different outcomes. And people like being around optimistic people. People don't like being around pessimistic people that are always complaining about things. Because you're optimistic about things, you're typically less stressed. And because you're less stressed, you tend to live healthier life. You see problems as kind of like solvable as opposed to permanent. Like you can be like, oh, we're doomed to kill ourselves and kill the environment. But you can also be optimistic and be convinced that like we'll be able to solve these problems as they come up. Like, you know, aluminum used to be more expensive than gold until we discovered it was more abundant and it was a lot, and we could extract it at a lot higher rate. And now gold is way more expensive than aluminum. Aluminum is very, very cheap. Basically, problems that we have in humanity, we tend to solve them. Or nobody wants the world to be shitty. You know, we're all striving to make it good. It's just a matter of how do we work together to make it that way. And I think there is really when you start looking at the world, and how there's less war, we're living longer, there's less disease, we're more connected. We have every reason to be optimistic. And there are a lot of problems that modern society has, for sure, like the first world problems of, people being depressed or suicidal and things like that. But those are problems that are solvable, and I'm optimistic that we'll be able to solve them. So, there's a lot of ways to be optimistic, but the first thing is just recognizing that the news is biasing us to be pessimistic. And by educating ourselves about the reality of the world, that's the first step to becoming optimistic. So like reading something like Enlightenment Now by Steven Pinker is a fantastic book. Another one is to be like proactively working on solving some of the problems that you see in the world. Um, Seeing progress made is important, but actively helping solve the issues we face is more important. And by being engaged in solving problems, you actually become more optimistic because you see the progress that we're making as humanity. And then like kind of reframing how you see things. Like it's very easy to be pessimistic about things, but if you reframe how you look at it, um, it like if you find the good in every situation, even in difficult times, you'll find it. It just makes sense to be optimistic because the world full of optimistic people is a better world to live in. Now, you don't want to just be ignorant to it all. You want to be optimistic and hopefully right and skeptical of things. But like, I think based on everything I understand about the world, it makes sense. Like, there's a lot of reasons to be optimistic. It's just a matter of really seeing the world in a clear way. I had a talk on meditation, but meditating helps you calm your mind down and just be very present. Um, Noticing yourself, like another way to be optimistic is noticing when you have negative self-talk or complaining a lot. Like it's very easy to complain about things, but noticing yourself complaining and trying to avoid complaining leads you to be a little more optimistic, and you become a more enjoyable person to hang around. Um, and then focusing on the things in life that you can control. There's only so much you can control, and the things in life that you can control are things you should focus on, and the things outside of your control you shouldn't let bother you because there's an infinite number of things that are outside your control that could bother you, and if you let them all bother you, then you could live a miserable life. Strive to have positive experiences in life. Seek the things you enjoy and find joy in others. Find joy in sharing experiences. Really experiment on your life and figure out the things in life that you enjoy. And then, yeah, sleep well, eat well, and stay active. It leads you to have a more positive outlook on life because you have more energy to do things and you accomplish more in life, which leads to a more fulfilled life. Um, but the overall idea of this is basically to and there's a lot of reasons to be optimistic in the world, and there's obviously a lot of reasons to be pessimistic too, but it doesn't make sense to live a pessimistic life. If you're pessimistic, you're less likely to actually finding solutions and solving problems that we need to solve in the world. And if you're optimistic, you're more likely to actually accomplish something and solve them. So be positive, stay positive, be optimistic. It makes a hell of a lot more sense to do that than to be pessimistic. So that will be my thought for today. So until tomorrow, have a good one.